Good evening. I call the September 18th, 2024 Apple Valley Planning Commission meeting to order. The first item of business is the approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, we have no changes for you at this time.
Thank you. Any changes from the commissioners? Can I have a move for approval?
So moved.
Second. Moved by Commissioner Scanlon and seconded by Commissioner Sando. Any questions or comments? If not, signify by saying aye if in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The next item of business is the approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda items are considered routine and will be enacted with a single motion, without discussion unless a commissioner or a citizen requests to have any item separately considered. It will then be moved to the land use action items for consideration. Can I get a motion of approval?
So moved.
Second. Motion made by Commissioner Scanlon and seconded by Commissioner Sandal. Any comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose, nay. Motion carries. That brings us to, tonight we have one public hearing. We will now open the public hearing for agenda item 4A on zoning ordinance amendment on cannabis business ordinance. The affidavit of publication for the notice of public hearing is available for inspection in the planning department. Everyone wishing to speak at this public hearing should be sure to fill out the attendance roster. Please include your name and addresses so that the accurate records can be maintained. We will begin the procedure with a brief presentation by city staff, followed by a presentation by the petitioner of the hearing. Upon the conclusion of the presentation, city staff will be asked to comment on the proposal's conformance with pertinent regulations and policies. After that, comments will be taken from the general public. Mr. Alex Sharp.
Thank you, Chair, and members of the Commission. As stated by the Chair, we are not looking for action this evening. This is a standard practice when we're dealing with larger ordinance amendments such as this one, or ones that where we may be seeking some additional public comment or anticipate the public comment could be coming in. So the only actions we are looking for this evening are for opening the public hearing, taking public comment, and closing the public hearing. I'm going to start tonight with kind of a brief presentation on some of the history, some of the facts of the items that we've gone through, what the city can regulate, our tentative schedule, the initial policy direction from council, and then we'll move to the kind of final, where are we looking for planning commission's direction as we move, and questions as we move into perhaps amending the ordinance based upon comments received. The planning commission has received much of this background. You should be familiar with it from not only this packet, but the packet previously that we were trying to provide some of that background. So I'm going to go through relatively quickly, but if there is a point that you'd like me to pause on, please feel free to interrupt and let me know. I also want to go through some of this just for the public and for background and for the public record purposes. So there will be a little bit of detail to it just because of that public record piece. So to start with, the cannabis ordinance is being initially drafted because in 2023 the state of Minnesota legalized the possession, use, manufacturing, and sale of certain cannabis products. The city, in turn, adopted interim ordinances or a moratorium until January 1, 2025. These interim ordinances effectively ban the retail sale of or the manufacturing, production, other uses from the city of Apple Valley until the Office of Cannabis Management could be developed and the city could draft a ordinance for adoption. That's where we are right now. In June 2024, the Office of Cannabis Management was officially created or went through with their initial draft of a guide for local cities. This was attached to your last packet. They've actually updated it briefly since the draft that you previously had, so we're now on version 4 since June. That being said, the changes are not pertinent as much to our draft ordinance. They more have to do with some of the licensing side of things. So the ordinance is being split into two different sides. One, the zoning ordinance, which the planning commission reviews, and then there's going to be a registration and licensing side. The licensing will be done through the state of Minnesota, registration will be done through the local city. You will see the registration will be done through the local city. You will see the registration portion of the ordinance coming to city council concurrently with the land use sections. But the planning commission at this time is only reviewing the draft land use sections of the ordinance, which is a standard practice when we're bringing forward an ordinance like this. On August 8th, 2024, apologies, staff brought forward certain policy questions to our city council. The primary purpose for this was to help guide both staff and the planning commission in some of those overarching policy items that could help craft this ordinance so that we didn't go down a perhaps incorrect direction. We want to make sure that when we're crafting this, due to this tight time frame, that we are getting it as accurate as we are able to the first time. And then we also want to make sure that we've met the expectations when we do get before council so that we do have something in place for that January 1, 2025 timeframe. The three policy questions essentially were, should the number of cannabis retailers be capped? If so, how should those licenses be determined? Should the number of retail cannabis businesses be capped? If so, how should those licenses, I'm sorry, that's the same question, I believe. Changed that earlier today and didn't catch it. Which zoning district should be considered for each type of use? And then the third one would be buffers between the different uses. So briefly, I'm going to go over some of the high-level facts of what the city's regulations can and cannot hit on, or where we can regulate and where we can't. The essential piece of this is we can only regulate the time, place, and manner. And so that is a very stringent set of regulations that also helps guide us into those very specific items that we were asking council. So the city is not able to regulate the possession of cannabis products, the sale of whether the sale of cannabis products can occur within the community, or the establishment essentially of those businesses within the community. So we have to allow that. What we are able to do is place a number on the number of retail sales. So again, I do want to emphasize the difference between that, and I've got it later in the presentation as well. The cap would only apply to a retail sale, not to manufacturing of a product or to the production of a product. Similar type of uses where a industrial use would be done. The city clerk has been doing a really good job of analogizing this to breweries. We essentially could limit where alcohol sales could occur, but we can't limit the fact that they could produce it. One other key item of note is that the retail sale of the hemp-based product, those that have been legal for a significantly longer period of time, is not something the city is able to regulate. Those have been legal for 2 years. The city may only regulate with those where they may be displayed within a store, and that is going to occur more through that registration portion, if it's going to occur, than it would through the zoning side. Zoning typically does not dictate where within a store a product may be displayed or sold. That third point is that time, place, and manner. That's essentially the zoning side of which zones do we want to have the buffers between sensitive uses, and do we want to have the buffers between between other retail sales. So the time would be hours of operation. That'll be done through that registration portion. The place is the zoning, and the manner is kind of in that zoning as well. I'm not going to linger on this too long. The key item for the Planning Commission here is that if everything proceeds as planned, we would bring this back before the Planning Commission on October 16th, 2024. That's when we would be seeking that draft recommendation. We would make amendments prior to that based upon comments heard this evening. But we are looking to try to keep that on a pretty tight schedule. As you see, I've only got one backup date to get this on and to be published, because one of the other items that needs to occur for an ordinance to be active on January 1, 2025 is it needs to be published. So we do need that additional time frame. that would be offered by the December 12th agenda that is not offered by that later meeting in December. So going into greater detail on the policy direction, and really where I'm going to stick to here so that we can move things along for your questions, is what the council's direction was. The city is able to limit the total number of retail licenses within the city. It's at a cap of 1 per 12,500 residents, and the city council provided staff and the city attorney with the policy direction that yes, we should limit the total number, at least for now. We can evaluate whether that needs to go up in the future. This allows us to get a handle on an industry, get used to what that looks like. And we should limit it to the minimum number that we must allow, which is 5 at this time. I do have one note on here that may be of interest to the Planning Commission. Even if we were to hit our 2040 comp plan max population, if we were to stay at that minimum, that would only be a total of 6 licenses at that 1 per 12,500. Whether we decided to ever go over that would be at the discretion of the local jurisdiction or us as the city of Apple Valley. The next piece is the buffers between sensitive uses. We really wanted to ask council this to see if there was going to be a yes with some sensitive uses, no with others. So some of the questions like uses that move around a little more, like daycares, should we have those buffers more than we should, say, from a school or public park? City council at this point has directed us to try to find buffers between, or to add the buffers between all of those uses at their maximum allowed by state statute. They're listed up there on the screen, but they're basically 1,000 foot from schools and 500 for all the others. The city also has the ability, though there is not the direction on what the buffer should be, between retail sale locations. City council, during their discussions, felt that the Planning Commission and staff should evaluate a 500 to 1,000 foot buffer because these were the buffers already provided by the state legislature, so they had some precedent to them. I've listed a couple of considerations on the slide here, but I would welcome others that the Planning Commission may have. I've included a little bit more detail in the report, but essentially what would be the difference between a 500 and 1,000 foot buffer? Should we be doing a buffer between the retail uses? What would those benefits or negatives be? An example that staff could come up with is, does it potentially prevent any kind of clustering that would be problematic? And then just the basic fact that Apple Valley does not have buffers between other types of businesses right now. So this would be a new thing for us, and it does require a pretty constant upkeep of where are they, but we already have to upkeep that map with the other buffers. With that, I'm going to go a little bit more time into this map just to explain how to read it. You had it in a large format in your packet. For the members of the public, I suggest viewing it online. It's going to be difficult on a screen such as this, but the way to read this map is not that these are the only buffers that are there, but that the only buffers that were retained in the map for legibility are those that already intersected a commercial retail location. So as an example, from our golf course on the upper northeast side of the community, there would normally be a buffer on that. That's a park. There's no commercial within 500 feet of that. So to clean up the map and make it more legible to show you where those buffers actually lie around those commercial locations, we've removed those that just didn't have that intersection. You'll notice there's some lone parcels over here on the east side of the community and on the far north that weren't touched by those buffers. And that's why those parcels still remain. But you'll also notice that there isn't a lot of commercial around them. So they're a good example of where those buffers would or would not be displayed should they be applicable to the map. Additionally, questions have been asked about uses within other communities. So say if there's a daycare, park, things of that nature and surrounding communities. I've contacted the League of Minnesota Cities on that very question, and they advise keeping your buffers within your community rather than from an adjacent community, as you don't know what their zoning ordinance may be. So we've done that rather than include licensed locations for, say, a daycare within Rosemount or Lakeville. I do want to pause if the Planning Commission has any questions on the map. That way we don't have to come back to it, but there will be a little bit to follow as well. I also think that it would be a good time to have some initial discussion potentially on that 500 to 1,000 foot buffer. One item of note as you begin that discussion, staff did find that no matter whether the commission and council decided to place a 500 or 1,000 foot buffer, we would not be in violation of the state legislature by overly limiting. We were able to place a number of locations within the community, sampling different sites to ensure that we were able to hit that minimum of 5 retail locations, no matter whether you did a 500 or 1,000 foot buffer. That's important because we cannot be more stringent than the state statute.
Any questions? Commissioner Halas?
Couple questions here. Is the Office of Management, is it already established? Are there people in place in order to deal with the ordinances once they're set up?
Commissioner Kurtz, Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Haas, the Office of Cannabis Management is in place. It's not fully staffed, and they would not be enacting the local ordinances by all communities. That's part of the registration process. So I'll go high level how the process would work if somebody was trying to apply for a license. They apply to the Office of Cannabis Management. They've already done so for preliminary applications. Let's just say, for example, they are provided with a preliminary license. Now they can go out and start soliciting locations. Now they find a location they might be interested in. They check with their local zoning authority about what might be needed. And then they apply for an official license at that location with the Office of Cannabis Management. The Office of Cannabis Management reaches out to the city and requires that we reply within 30 days to an application stating whether it does in fact meet our zoning ordinances. If we don't reply, or if we reply that yes they do, they can operate within that location. Now that's just for the retail side of it. That is not for another license type like, say, manufacturing of a product. They do not have those same buffer requirements. Does that answer the question a little more?
Yes, it does. Very detailed. Follow-up question on that is, if they put in for a license, are they restricted to going within the commercial area, the red area that you've got on the map here, if we're looking for retail space?
Again, Chair, Commissioner Halas, the answer to that is somewhat nuanced. Yes, but there are two types, mesobusiness and microbusiness, that can operate within industrial zones and have a retail component. Again, think of that brewery analogy with the tap room, or Abdallah with their chocolates. They are still regulated, as they are in the draft ordinance, by having a percentage of their space can only be retail, so they must be primarily manufacturing, not a retail use. But they would be able to have a retail component, and their retail side of things would still be subject to all of the buffers noted on this, and to the total max licenses.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mahold?
Madam Chair, thanks. Alex, these might be more rhetorical questions, but I've got some other things that'll come up, I think, related to some of the other things in the report. Why are there buffers? Are there particular risks that are, or concerns or problems or issues that are attempted to be mitigated by buffers?
Chair, Commissioner, this is going to be a somewhat speculative answer. I would assume that the legislature put the ability for buffers within the statute to try to deter them from the sale of those products from occurring around locations that could be deemed sensitive, daycares, treatment houses, schools, etc. I believe that they're going off of some very old work done in tobacco law, where tobacco stores specifically wanted to locate around some more sensitive uses to familiarize themselves with that clientele. It's unclear whether that translates, as this is a brand new venture. So I couldn't say the complete intent of the Minnesota State Legislature. There's a few of them. So doing our best to put it together, but the reason why the city of Apple Valley has enacted it, the council was relatively clear that for the moment, the statute allows it, and we would be concerned about those products ending up in those locations. And so they directed that we begin with those buffers to start with at the very least.
And certainly the buffers are basically the only restrictions that a municipality can have. I mean, this is basically a mandated, the state of Minnesota is saying you have to have retail cannabis businesses with the restrictions on the number and also with the buffers that are, these are really the buffers that are in the statute. So the state of Minnesota, the governor and the legislature have said, cities like Apple Valley, you have to have this business. You don't have the discretion to decide not to have this business.
To clarify, Chair, Commissioner, the state legislature was actually quite clear that they were not saying that we have to have this business. They were stating very clearly, we cannot prohibit the use and sale of this business. So we don't have to have a business in Apple Valley. There is one per congressional district that nobody can deny. And then based upon populations and all of that, that's split up also amongst cities and populations. It may be that the demand is not present for Rosemount to have 7 or 8, and Burnsville to have 6, and Egan to have 9, and Apple Valley to have 5 of these. They aren't saying we must have a minimum of 5. They're saying that we can't prohibit anything more than that, essentially was where that had come down.
Okay. And again, these may be just rhetorical questions, but are there similar buffers for, you'd mentioned tobacco? Does Apple Valley have buffers in place for retail tobacco establishments?
Chair, Commissioner, I'm sorry, no, we do not have that. I also want to respect the rhetorical side, so.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm not, all I'm saying is I'm not trying to play gotcha. I'm just trying to get some ideas out there, some thoughts out there.
For example, one of the items that came up during council was we have liquor stores across the street or kitty corner from middle schools, and it's municipal liquor. So that was a discussion point amongst council on whether we should have the buffers. Ultimately, the policy direction was, yes, we should still have them. No, we don't have them for other uses. Adult uses is the only buffer that we have built into the ordinance right now that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question before I go on here. There's 13 different licenses for this. How are you going to determine which, I mean, you wouldn't want all one license coming in, wouldn't you want a variety of them?
Chair Kurtz, thankfully the city doesn't need to determine. We're not the one issuing the license. There is a cap on several different types of licenses. Microbusiness, mesobusinesses, retail businesses. I think there's one more. I haven't focused as much on where the state and OCM must do their licensing. I've focused a lot more on where the city has been. We would register the business. We are in charge of local enforcement, of making sure that they are compliant with our registration. But issuing that license is up to the Office of Cannabis Management, not the city of Apple Valley.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Madam Chair, Alex, it's pretty if I'm interpolating the map correctly, it's pretty focused on the area where possibly a location of these 5 locations can be. And whether, how do I want to say that? Seemed like it would be quite condensed to have if there was actually 5 businesses in place, that they'd all be fairly close to each other based on this, because they're really kind of central village orientated locations.
Chair Kurtz, I wouldn't say there's Central Village. Central Village is a much smaller district. The open areas are in the main commercial core of Apple Valley.
Right.
But all of the red that you see on the screen, that's all of the commercial allowed in Apple Valley in the entire community. So this map displays anywhere that we have any allowed retail use, with the exception of gas stations, because they are not considered a full retail use. They're a motor fuel station by our code. They have a retail sale component, but they are generally considered separate. They're allowed within our retail business, but there are some other zones that allow the use of a gas station outside of it. Otherwise, you were looking at the extent of anywhere a retail sale can occur within the city of Apple Valley on this map. So if you see a colored area, whether that be the purple, the gray for industrial, or the red for the commercial, that's anywhere that any retail sale can occur. So that's where all of your mattress stores are, that's where all of your coffee shops are, that's where anywhere that you're going to be doing any kind of retail sale is. The reason why the industrial and mixed business campus are on the map is because of that retail component, such as the Abdallah. So they are not your general retail sale area. They're an ancillary retail to a manufacturer, but that is the extent in the community-wide area. Our retail is not a huge area, but we're a pretty large force within the market.
Right. So for an example, if we look down in the northeast corner of the retail district there, neighboring Cobblestone, that's an example based on the buffers. That would be an area that would be an option open to a business.
Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Scanlon, that is
License.
correct. Yep.
Right.
Those smaller areas, you'll notice one straight north of there as well on Pilot Knob,
Yep.
tend to get knocked out by single nodes or a couple of nodes that locate closely together. Whereas our main retail core, which is our downtown, doesn't have that same issue. The periphery tends to have impacts with that, but the core in itself doesn't as much because of the fact that it's our retail core. So you aren't as much around the parks or the one piece that actually sets them off the most, if you look at the map enough, is going to be your daycares because they're allowed there.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pruitt?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Kurtz. Alex, just a quick question. The higher potency retail cannabis locations are capped at 5, and I was just curious if that includes medical cannabis retailers. That's included in that cap of the currently established cap of 5.
Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Pruitt, yes, that does include the medical cannabis.
Commissioner Mahowald?
Madam Chair, Alex, just where can, now that it's been legalized, I wish I knew this, but where can cannabis products be consumed now? Are there any, can they be smoked or ingested pretty much anywhere now, or are there restrictions on that?
I will bring our city attorney in.
Madam Chair, currently, under the state law, a person can consume in their private residence, period. And we have in Apple Valley an ordinance that specifically prohibits any smoking. This is cannabis. We're talking cannabis, not the lower potency hemp beverages, edibles, that thing. And we have an ordinance in place that was in place in when the moratorium went in, so 2023, that prohibits consuming cannabis in any city public property.
Okay, and so that's similar to alcoholic beverages, unless you're in a licensed location, you can't just stand on the public sidewalk and drink, or can you? I guess that's the.
Well, I don't think that's true.
Okay.
I don't think there's a law prohibiting open consumption of alcohol. You cannot drive with an open beer.
Sure,
you know,
sure.
but
Okay.
and in our park regulations and ordinance allows beer, but it prohibits spirits.
Correct. Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Sandell?
Madam Chair, Alex, I apologize because I think you've probably answered this question a couple times possibly. Will there able to be retail business in the mixed business campus then, or no?
Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Sandall, that's possible. Industrial uses were intended as part of the mixed business campus. The mixed business campus may also include some commercial uses, depending upon where the individual zones were to come out or things of that nature. We are still drafting that ordinance, so it's difficult to say that with 100% certainty. However, where it can be said with a little bit more certainty is if we had an industrial user, such as a large manufacturer of a cannabis product, I shouldn't say large, the mezzo business of a cannabis product could potentially have that, or would be allowed to have that retail sale so long as they were not subject to a buffer as well.
So I think this is where my confusion is, because I maybe I'm like wrong about where things are here, but like a Schuler Shoes or something is selling there, right? Like, so I'm just curious about what the difference is.
So Schuler Shoes is not within the mixed business campus anymore. They went straight zoning when they were Lunds Byerly's, all of that. So they were actually pulled out of that a couple of years ago. They were initially part of it. They are part of the original sand and gravel area, but as the mixed business campus had not yet been completed, that zoning ordinance had not been completed, they went with standard zoning districts. So they're just a zoning district down in this area here in this yellow buffer.
I'm looking too far north. I'm sorry.
No worries.
My fault. Sorry. Thank you.
Commissioner Scanlon?
You were asking, Alex, concerning locations, retail locations, and then having buffers around them. And with the idea that we would have a minimum of 5 locations open or available within Apple Valley based on the state. So if we put buffers around these, with the exception of the west side and the far east, we might have difficulty finding 5 locations for people to have retail space.
Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Scanlon, I'm glad you asked. We have a very talented GIS team here, and he and I sat together, and we didn't want to create a map on every potential spot, as we don't know if those property owners are interested in this. We don't want to get into property rights. We wanted to simply make sure that the city, if we enacted either a 500 or 1,000-foot buffer, would not be in violation of the state statute, essentially effectively prohibiting them by placing this buffer in place. What we were able to find is that with a 500-foot buffer, we could at least fit 19 different sites. With a 1,000-foot buffer, we could fit at least 13 different sites. Now, could they get more prohibitive as the zoning districts for mixed business campus are enacted? Yes, and it's something that would have to be considered as we move forward. But barring the mixed business campus, which is where a couple of them had to be, we have some outlying sites within the community that offer us being able to immediately place them in 1, 2, and 3, and so then we really only needed to find a couple more. If you're looking at the map, you can see kind of the general areas that I'm talking about, and that allowed us to feel some confidence that we weren't going to be in violation of that state statute.
That helps a lot, so thank you for that added clarification. Thank you.
Commissioner Sandow?
Madam Chair, Alex, hopefully this is a better question. What happens if a preschool wants to move in next door to a retail business for cannabis?
Chair, Commissioner, I think I'm actually going to allow our city attorney to opine on that one, because that's been, I believe we're at legal nonconforming, but that's not standing out right now, so.
Madam Chair, no, it would not be, legal nonconforming has nothing to do with it. So if there is a existing cannabis retail business, they're registered, and a preschool decides to come in next door, then that is the preschool's decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're good to go.
Okay. The point that staff is still looking for some direction on, not necessarily from here, but enough to be able to draft the ordinance. You'll notice in the draft ordinance, we do have a 500 or 1,000-foot buffer. So during your discussion period, if not while I'm here, please be sure to discuss that 500 or 1,000 feet, as we would need that to bring that forward for you the next meeting. The third and final question is which zoning districts should be permitted. You've seen a draft land use table, and then you saw a slightly amended draft land use table, and this happened in large part due to discussions with our city attorney. We we're attempting to bring forward a conditional use permit for a lot of the manufacturing type uses, production and all of that. I'll go to the table here. And specifically in the business park, I-1, I-2 zones, we had placed a lot of conditional use permits in your original piece. The reason for that was to try to make sure that we could mitigate things such as smell or screening of trucks. And upon discussion with the city attorney, we look at it and the state is requiring a lot of the regulations regarding smell and impacts to neighboring properties with that. Screening of trucks and other machinery is done through our exterior storage CUPs. So we already have in place a lot of the concerns that we were seeking to address out of that. It sets us up where we probably needed to put them down as a permitted use so that we can ensure that we're not overstepping with that. Additionally, we would have needed to come up with performance standards with a conditional use permit that we don't with a permitted use. So one of the other key concerns that I'm sure Sharon is wanting me to mention is that if we put them down as a conditional use, you have to remember that a conditional use is a generally permitted use. The city has to say you are in violation of a specific performance standard or we can't deny it. So we'd be bringing forward a public hearing with the public around a location for a type of business that the city effectively couldn't say no to because if they met the standards of the state. And we wanted to be able to cite that back to the state saying they've mandated the use. We must permit, we can't say no to this. And that was a position that we didn't want to put the planning commission or city council in. And so that's the major change from this. The only other change that I want to note is that with the PDR, we have that established on this table that you didn't see in our initial draft upon refinement. It was our way of being able to make it for all of our planned developments, which are the white sections on the zoning map, so that where we allow those retail sales, such as the one that Commissioner Scanlon noted in that southeast portion of town, Target, all of that, that's a planned development. The reason why it was red on the map was because it's guided for commercial, but we added that section of the table to make it very clear that the retail sale is permitted anywhere where any other general retail sale product is permitted. With that, if there are concerns about the table, we would love to hear about them so that we could potentially change that. I can linger with that, or you can ask any questions on it.
Commissioner Mahonwald?
Just a question with respect to permitted use and conditional use. Would, obviously in Apple Valley, the liquor stores are owned and operated by the city. Are they subject to a conditional use permit for that operation?
I believe off-sale liquor is subject to a conditional use permit.
Okay.
In some zones, not all.
Okay. Bars or restaurants selling alcoholic beverages, are they typically
Only with
subject-
outdoor patios.
Okay, that's the only requirement.
Generally, there's some PDs that require it simply due to adjacent uses.
Just again, my own thought on it. I know that the state has basically said a city cannot say no to this, and that would make a permitted use consistent with that directive or mandate, if you will. I am wondering if it would make some sense to stick with a conditional use permit as this initiative is enacted and goes forward. I guess I have to put my faith and trust in the governor and the legislature that they took into account all potential adverse consequences, all potential benefits of this new directive. But if there are issues and concerns that get raised later on about potential adverse consequences, unintended consequences, I'm wondering if making the permit or the licensure, whatever, subject to a conditional use permit, the city would therefore have some protections down the road should there be findings, lessons learned in Minnesota or elsewhere that would allow for other restrictions similar to those that are imposed with regard to the sale of alcoholic beverages at a liquor store, if that makes any sense.
Yes. I thought that's what you were saying.
Madam Chair, to answer your question briefly, so the distinction between a permitted use, and again, no, we're talking just about zoning right now. Where can these businesses go? Where can the 11 or 12 different businesses that are each licensed separately by the state, where are they allowed, right? So for today, we're only talking about zoning. Where? So is it going to be a permitted use or a conditional use permit? Or a conditional use? If we say it's a conditional use, requiring a conditional use permit, then our code must set forth conditions of that use. If we don't have any conditions in our code saying, these are the conditions that you must meet before you're permitted, then the city must permit it. If we did have a whole list of conditions, I'm not going to try to think of an example, but if it's a conditional use in our code lists all the conditions that must be met to be permitted. If a business meets all the conditions, the city must issue the permit. So the city really doesn't have a lot of wiggle room or authority to say no if all those conditions are met by a business that needs a conditional use. Similar to, probably a good example would be your outdoor dining at a restaurant with an on-sale liquor license. If they meet all the conditions of the proposed outdoor dining area, they get that conditional use permit. Now, whether the state, kind of learns lessons as they go through, those are regulatory issues, not zoning, So, and then the state is doing all the regulation. I mean, the state is telling these, setting regulations. What they can, if it's a dispensary, that's why I'm going to use a retail sale, it's a dispensary. You cannot go into a gas station or a convenience store. Cannabis is not going to be there because the state is very clear. If it's a cannabis retailer, they can only sell certain things. Just like a liquor store can only sell certain things. They can't sell milk and eggs and, so you're not going to be worrying about, as of right now, retail sales in convenience stores or in the grocery store or in the, wherever else.
Okay, thank you.
If that helps or answers your question.
Anecdotally,
Thank you.
where we have liquor stores as a conditional use within our code, we have no performance standards. It's likely a holdover from quite some time ago. I don't want to say when that was exactly adopted because I didn't research that enough for the meeting. I know that it has been there for a significant period of time, and that it's listed as a conditional use within that zone without any standards beneath it. So we would be obligated to grant ourselves the liquor license to go in a liquor store. For example, as to what one would be, it would be 500 feet from a school. So we're kind of doing that through the buffering already on the cannabis side.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Madam Chair, Alex, how many municipal liquor stores does Applewood Valley have?
3 officially, we always joke 4 for the one up at the golf course.
Okay. And we have an option, or not an option, but a minimum for the set here in Apple Valley that we need to look at for the cannabis of 5. And then based on what you were just discussing in my previous question, the number of retail sites that you probably have kind of scoped out initially here too, that cover that number, that it seems like to me, based on what we've been talking about so far, the 1,000 or 1,000 square buffer would be appropriate, especially with something new like this. And I question the need that there need to be closer to each other than that.
Understood.
Thank you.
Commissioner Halas?
Madam Chair, Alex, just for clarification, I'll use, I guess I could use Apple Valley High School as an example. Quite a bit of property there. It butts up on the north side to 140th Street. That's the barrier that we're talking about, 1,000 feet from that, or not from the building that you're talking about, right?
Chair Kurtz, Commissioner Haas, the reason why I decided to go back to this is, yes, 1,000 feet from schools is from the property line. There was the 500 foot from an attraction within a park that is regularly used by minors, including a playground or athletic field, that was straight out of the state statute. That required the city, and we did evaluate this, to place arbitrary squares around play apparatus, baseball diamonds, things of that nature. We did go through that exercise, and then the Office of Cannabis Management released their initial draft of that guide for cities that you have. And if you look in there, I think at about page 6 on the very bottom, it tells us that the cities should use our buffers where we have from any other type of use. So, and we should remain consistent with our existing zoning code. We have buffers essentially from 2 different types of uses. One is the adult uses that I already mentioned, and the second you've seen before and granted variances for things such as Popeyes. It's not a true buffer, but it essentially says that retail, class 2 restaurants, fast food, need to be a certain distance away from a residential use, and we've always gone property line to property line. And so with the advice published by the Office of Cannabis Management, we have then gone back to the property line for all of those types of uses, as that is what their advice was. There is going to continue to be discussion for some time about that attraction within a park provision that's in the statute. So I don't want to answer as clearly on that one. For the moment, we are doing it property line to property line. If that needs to be amended based upon a court case or further guidance from the state, then that could be amended, but that's the only one. The others are very clear from a property line.
Thank you.
Okay, so do you want us to go forward with,
If you're done with questions, then the final item here would be take any public comments that are present this evening, discuss amongst yourselves, and help provide some of that policy direction for staff so that we can bring back a ordinance to you at the I'm sorry, not your next meeting.
16th?
Thank you. I was going to say September 16th, and that's not
So
accurate.
we don't have to answer that tonight, is what you're saying?
We would like some level of policy direction.
Got it.
So that we have 500,000 in your draft ordinance. At that meeting, we will 100% need to know which one. If you want something different than that, or if you have comments on different zoning districts or anything along those lines, that would be a substantial change. Any of that you are able to provide this evening is certainly helpful, but not required. We will need all of that direction for sure when you take action.
Okay. So with that, we will take public comments. Please come to the podium to speak and address all comments and questions to the chair. Not unless Becky's mother wants to come up. Do we have any other comments?
Excuse me.
My city attorney is awesome. One other item of note, and I had it in the very last item with that question slide and then breezed through it really fast. You do have a public comment on the table before you. That is part of the public record. It is something that I highlighted and starred, and then we went into deeper discussions. So
That was probably.
please do take note of that. And staff does consider that to be a relatively minor comment, and is the only public comment we've received to date.
Okay. But I can close the public hearing, correct? So if there are no further comments, I will close this public hearing. It is the policy of the Planning Commission not to act on an item on the same night as its public hearing. The Planning Commission will weigh all comments and information received tonight in its deliberation at future meetings. This item will continue to appear on future Planning Commission agendas until a recommendation on the petition can be forwarded to the City Council. We good? Bringing us to number 5, land use, action items. Get my paperwork here. That is Mr. Tim Benetti. And we are looking at Orchard Place Apartments, comprehensive plan amendment.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. This is a carryover from our discussion on the 21st of August. This is not a public hearing. You conducted a public hearing at the last meeting, and we are simply continuing the discussion on this item. Again, reminder, this is a comprehensive plan amendment. Much different than a zoning, a little bit related to it, but not the same. This is a request from Trident Development Group to re-guide a certain parcel of land. At this point, we're at 5.62 acres from C commercial to high-density residential. As again, reminder, public hearing was conducted and closed at the August 21st meeting. This is for follow-up consideration of comments. We do have a number of comments as noted in your packet. I'm going to go through those very quickly and briefly, but I just want to give an opportunity for you to react to those, comment on those, or anybody from the audience if necessary. So we're asking you for give final consideration from this amendment from C commercial to high density. Just a reminder, the site located right next door to the area we were just referring to off of 157th and English, Texas Roadhouse, Punch Pizza, Lunds & Byerly, Schuler Shoes, and the recently approved West Schwab Tires. Again, the ponding area off to the west side or to the left. You're starting to see the beginning elements of the North Creek Greenway Trail system as well. Again, 5.62 acres. This is going to be segmented off that original Outlot D, Orchard Place Second. So this is going to be separated off, and the remainder will be left in for future development as well. Again, comp plan just shows the coloring right now as commercial, proposed to HD with the brown. Also, just for note, the zoning is consistent with the current commercial as RB. So the site plan is, again, this is for illustrative purposes only. Usually, this is just to show you what a proposed plan amendment could entail or encourage or allow or permit, if you want, with future entitlement. Right now, they're looking at just an apartment building, a large-scale apartment building, parking, some site amenities, trail systems, which we'll get into very quickly. Again, example only, just an example of what they produce, they being Trident for a typical housing project. Again, these are not being approved or recommended for tonight. Again, the site plan. We just want to show that there's also a proposed Outlaw B system that would connect a trail system over to this gathering space, which I have a nice image of later on. At your last meeting, we had some key issues or discussion points. Have conditions changed that impact the land use? Is multifamily residential an appropriate use of the site? Will multiple family residents be impacted by the nearby commercial development, including the auto-oriented uses such as a car wash, the new West Schwab Tire Store? How can conflicts be mitigated? So we start off with number 1. Will change to HD negatively impacted the commercial areas to the east or the north? And in the report, we provide some examples where we have Park Sagabella, Egos Novella, Remington Cove. These are clear examples where we have high-density residential in or nearby retail commercial uses. And through thoughtful design, we can help mitigate those potential negative impacts. Sometimes those retail businesses, there's sort of a symbiotic relationship between the high-density residential and those retail uses because they feed on each other, so to speak. They like the impacts of the high density with the multiple people in those residential units to feed into that retail or that commercial element. And overall, multiple family housing and retail does coexist fairly peacefully and with minimal complaints received by the city. Again, this is a very busy slide, but bear with me. What is the vision for this area? How will the proposed comp plan amendment fit with the overall vision? So the approved current vision right now is commercial, and that was established by your 2040 comp plan, which was adopted back in July of 2020. Some or most of you were probably part of that adoption. Areas can be changed due to unforeseen economic forces, such as, changes in the real estate market, demand for certain uses. In this case, is housing a demand. The comp plan is not absolute. It can be changed per the discretion of its leaders and input from your residents and business owners. And that's where we're here tonight. Under our Chapter 5 housing, we do allow the Apple Valley can accommodate its forecasted housing growth through infill and redevelopment. This is redevelopment. Under minimum density assumptions, Apple Valley can accommodate nearly 40% of its forecast housing growth in Orchard Place, which is this area that we're referring to, and other designated sites. The land use chapter is an essential tool for meeting these housing needs. The city has successfully used the land use plan with related policies and controls to produce livable, desirable neighborhoods, diversify the housing supply, and create affordable housing units. As housing needs change, these approaches can be adopted or adapted to meet certain community objectives. So you can look at this change as being somewhat of an extreme. However, the change to high-density land use is not overtly consistent or in conflict with the general goals of the 2040 plan. And this is what we try to encourage on our housing opportunities is there a conflict? In other areas where it can support this land use, such as this commercial area, surrounding uses, medical uses, the future light industrial, we don't see that being a concern at this point. What is the current vacancy rate for retail development? Right now, the overall retail market has softened a bit in the last few years, anecdotally, primarily due to the high cost of building new stuff or getting financing for those type of retail activities. But it's not dead. So it's slowed down a bit. But the comp plan notes that high-density residential neighborhoods benefit from the proximity of commercial goods and services. Our city engineers have confirmed that this subject site, adequately is served with utilities and streets. There should be no significant changes needed to serve that site. The revised master plan that was proposed by the Rockport Fisher families does show that the proposed development maintains the high quality and vibrancy that it was envisioned for that area. Similarly, the rates of at or below 5% vacancy for multifamily is considered healthy in area housing markets. A vacancy level below that indicates the market is not adequately met. Recently, we are updated with a market advisors report that shows what kind of apartment levels, rental rates, vacancy rates are being shown throughout the metro area. Right now, our vacancy rate at Apple Valley as of March 2024 is just under 3%. So when I say 5% or less, that means you've got a really healthy, active housing market, and that there could be a demand for more of this type of housing. Orchard Place is a prime location for commercial. Maybe needs more time to order to develop. Staff agrees the Orchard Place is a prime location, and the plan was established a number of years ago for a hearty mix of commercial, industrial, medical, and offices, and you're starting to see that develop right now. A number of those commercial uses include Texas Roadhouse, the Orchard Strip Center, Mr. Car Wash, Lunds, Chase. I know all of you have seen this. You've been to some of those ribbon cuttings. It's starting. That gravel pit is going to someday go away, and a lot of that area remains undeveloped, but there's plans for that area, and those are not going away. We intend to keep up the high-density areas where they need to be in the commercial retail and the added industrial and other supportive uses. So the retail commercial development in this area can be a bit cyclical. It is not easily predicted, but the need for housing does seem to be in high demand and continually sought after in suburban settings such as Apple Valley. What are the development goals? The community context section of the comp plan notes that housing affordability and retail trends are two forces that will impact Apple Valley's future that will need to be monitored. The national retail trends, the current national retail bubble requires monitoring and repositioning, given the significant amount of retail space currently available in Apple Valley. Housing affordability. While Apple Valley is affordable, there's a general lack of affordable housing for low-income earners. Apple Valley is still committed to meeting its share of regional affordable goals and keeping local access to well-paying head of household jobs. Now, just for the record, the project that's being proposed by Trident Development, it will not be an affordable workforce type of housing, but that doesn't mean that that's still an opportunity to provide for the needs of the community. So we are looking also at the other comments were light pollution. We have strict standards on light pollution. We have typically a downcast cutoff type standard for any of our light standards outside, like the parking lots. So we can control that. That 1 foot per candle is easily measurable today. Before, it was, in the old days when I was growing up as a planner, you had to go up there and make a judgment call. Now we have light meters, we can figure this out. And we usually require a photometric plan that goes with every lighting plan, site plan. So we have experts tell us, will this meet those certain requirements? And that's something that we look at and present to you as part of a future site plan review. Any impacts to schools? ISC 196 indicated they have no concerns with the proposed project. So very quick, simple response. We're presenting it as such. The property north of Orchard Place is designated HD, like the subject site. Is there concern that this proposed might compete with the other developments? We don't feel it will. It will. This is different. That was more of a townhome development on the other side. So that townhome development meets a certain element or desire. This is another market that they're shooting for. A 4-story building would be an eyesore. Orchard Place is a 3-story development. The appearance of the 4-story building may spark some negative perceptions of a hulking tall structure. However, it's separated by the pond area and also situated next to retail elements. We don't think there will be any type of impacts to the nearby residential uses. To the south, you'll note that there's Quarry Point Park. Hopefully I got that name right. So there should be no impacts to that as well. And we do have examples of where 4-story buildings are constructed in some high impacted areas, and we don't have any issues with those. Sidewalks around the ponds will have more traffic. We hope so, because that's why we built them. That's what we want. We want people to use our trails. We are currently, you may have seen that I think they just completed the placement of the bridge over the North Creek Greenway Trail over there, just to the west of the site, I think this week. So there's some happy things going on over there. We hope to have a ribbon cutting on that trail system very soon. And that is an important feature to bring our residents from Farmington all the way up to the Minnesota Zoo. So we're very excited on that. So the use of the private sidewalks in this development is not expected to be impacted. Number 11, concerns about increasing crime, more riffraff on the trails. When I heard that term, I respect the rights of people to make comments. It's their right. I sort of took umbrage and a little taken aback by the term riffraff. The only riffraff I know on these trails are unnamed city attorneys that love to use these trails very well. They are a very happy person on a trail. So, but no, in all seriousness, we don't see a lot of riffraff. We don't see a lot of criminal activity or elements on these trails. They're enjoyed by all people. So I think that's sort of a misstatement on a part. I understand that there's a perception that you bring trails, they're going to bring strangers into the neighborhood. Well, everybody has a right to use those trails. Those are your neighbors, mostly, are using those trails in your community or they're nearby. And I think most people that use our trails are pretty decent people. So we're going to let that comment just ignore that one. Concern about the number of apartment developments that have been constructed the last 15 years. Very true. We have built a lot of apartments in this area and in the community. However, that's where the demand is. And our single family areas are pretty well filled up. We don't have a lot of areas to provide for the typical detached, single-family homes. But when you're looking at the population, we have 51%, majority is found in single-family, 30% in townhomes, and only 16% in multifamily apartments, condos, 3% in manufactured housing. So this is a good mix, and that's what you want to see in your housing percentages. Concern that re-guiding the site will result in loss of jobs. Staff response, the subject development is guided and zoned for retail. And retail jobs tend to not meet the criteria for full-time head of household jobs. Some do, some might not, but jobs will be created as a result of this development for ongoing management, leasing, and maintenance. And the applicant did respond that there will be a full-time community manager, leasing, marketing manager, maintenance, part-time management. So there is a limited number of jobs being created with this use. So not all is lost on the apartments. Why aren't apartments planned in another location north of the retail area with less traffic? The Planning Commission must respond to the applications. It cannot direct a project to a different location, meaning you can't tell a developer that's before you, hey, wouldn't you be easier or better over there or a little more appropriate? We can't do that. This is where they would like to be, and we have to react to where, what they're presenting to you. And based on past development, we find apartment projects greatly benefit from proximity to rec trails, proximity to public parks and ball fields, which this does, visibility from high traffic thoroughfares, quick access, convenient access to goods and services, ability to live close to employment. And again, the applicant did say that we believe the Orchard Place site provides for all these local amenities. Apartments will result in increased traffic and overcrowding. In my course as a planner, this statement gets a lot of, this is one of the things that a lot of residents who are opposed to any type of apartment project I've been associated with, they think that the apartment was going to produce way more traffic than a retail or commercial area. It's completely opposite. Believe it or not, the trips generated per unit are much less than the trips generated by a full-time commercial retail activity. But anyway, it's just, and most traffic engineers or traffic reports that I deal with or you will review will show that there's a lot less traffic generated by even a large 4-story apartment of this nature. The impacts are very, very, very less than a typical residential, or excuse me, commercial or retail use. Currently, no pedestrian crossing signs at 157th and English. We did respond that there are, with the still ongoing development in the area, we do have ideas or suggestions for those crossings. We did indicate that at the Les Schwab development when we presented that developer will be providing for a lot of crosswalk sections into the commercial areas to the east and to the north, because that's what we asked for, because we had planned for those all along. Again, a lot of the original plan was for connected to trails and pedestrian amenities. I think there was a concern about they're putting a lot of amenities, but we don't have access to them. And you shouldn't, because the developer, if they're putting those in for their tenants or their paying customers, they're not offering to the general public. Now, can they do that? Sure, but most of them don't. A lot of apartments, complexes that you've ever seen, they do have little private playgrounds, sitting areas, dog parks, or maybe a little athletic or recreational court. Those are for their tenants, and that's what they're paying them. They're paying for that right to use that, and not have to wait for someone coming off the trail wanting to use their amenities. So we feel that those are things that they can provide, but we also are going to provide. And we're going to show you real quick here. This is a community area, a little hard to see on this map, but basically the apartments would be about here. This blue line represents an approximate location of that North Creek Greenway Trail. And right near the northwest corner of the apartment is this little gathering space. Our city engineer has been designing this for the course of a few years. The original developer has provided for a contribution of funds to provide for this. So this is for the general public. Again, this is part of the trail system and the connecting trail system we talked about that would go on the north side of the apartments. So this is something that we want to encourage people to use or feel like it's their own, because it will be. It's for the public. A question was asked about how many units are we allowed or supposed to have for affordable. Based on the Met Council, we're supposed to have about 468 units planned for the next, according to the plan, for 20 years. Right now, these are numbers, these are goals, these are targets. They're not an absolute. We don't have to meet them, but we strive to. And we encourage these. And again, based upon the area median income, this is from a Fannie Mae website. So our median income for Apple Valley is about 123.7. And again, that's usually typically based upon a family of 4, 80%, 98,960, and a 50% area median would be about 62,000. Just to give you an idea of what they're talking about for number of units. I can't tell you how many units we've provided up to this point. Our Met Council sector rep was supposed to get us that information. I think they keep track of that number. Alex, I don't think we ever got that number. So we can have that number to you later on if it's important to you. With that, I'm sorry I want to take some time on those questions, but staff is still recommending approval of the comp plan amendment from C commercial to HD high density of the 5.62 acre parcel on the northwest corner of 157 in English. I can take your questions now. Otherwise, I know the applicant is behind us. They have a little presentation that if you would permit them to make, or you can defer it back to them for any of the other questions or concerns you might have. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Tim?
No.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Madam Chair, Tim, you mentioned, and maybe the petitioner can confirm, that these are going to be basically market rate apartments as far as what we're going after here. And I think one of the pitches for bringing this in and with the zoning changes that we're going to kind of adding a mixed use component to the commercial space that's here already. And this was not part of that original design or thought process as we've been building out that area, is that the idea of more walkability, interconnection. My concern, the way it's set up right now, is there's going to be a lot of walking in the street or in the parking lot drive areas. And that it's not something we can solve tonight, but that when they come back with the formal plan, that we can look at that more on how that can be solved to, you know, when somebody wants to walk down to Lunds Byerly's or go down to the vet office or to the new medical office building, they can do that easily without having to backtrack, and because everybody wants to go straight line to wherever they want to go. And which is part of our plan is the livability, the walkability within the community.
Agreed.
And that be re-examined as we go forward with this, so if we approve it, so.
Mr. Scanlon, that's a great observation. And yes, we want to encourage that walkability in this area and other areas.
Yep.
So yes, and that's why we are encouraging, making sure that crosswalks are strategically placed at the appropriate locations. We want to make sure that any pedestrians using that area on both sides of that roadways, they have at least a safe route to their objective. And we don't want them going from point A to point B as straight as a crow flies. We want them to use those walking trails because that's what they're there for, and those sidewalks.
Yeah, I did drive by there today, and I did see they're putting the trailway bridge in place, so it's nice to see that coming forward. Thanks, Tim.
Yep. By the way, that bridge will be named Sharon Hills.
Tim, there is a bus facility right in that area
Yes.
too, isn't there? So they could
Correct.
use that also. You know, this is my opinion. I'd rather see something going up like this than leaving it empty, or, you know, if they can't get retailers in there and stuff. And I do agree. I think it's needed for the community. I think it's good for retail business to bring people in. So just wanted to state my opinion there. Commissioner Mahowald.
Madam Chair, Tim, just a couple of questions. I know you had a slide up there with respect to the vacancy rate, the
Yep.
2.9%. Was that just for high density for apartments, or was that for affordable housing too, or is there any?
That is for all apartments, Commissioner
Okay.
Mahowald, and that's, we met with the developer, me and my staff, and, this afternoon, and he remembers about a year ago, it was down to almost 1%, which is unbelievably low. And again, that's, some can look at that as a great thing, and some can look at it as a bad thing, because if there's a demand, you're probably gonna be paying for a little bit more higher rents, because if they know their demand's met. But you also wanna make sure that if 1% tells you that those units are being used, and people are living here, moving to this area, and something's drawn them to this area, we wanna keep them here. And this is the beginning of their life cycle housing, basically. I think most of us can remember starting off making about $12 an hour less, maybe $5 an hour, our age. So we started off small. We started off in our apartments, later moved to maybe a bigger apartment, later to our housing, and then we're going back to, you know, the smaller housing. So this is, you know, this is just an opportunity to present that. And when you bring up, you know, you're changing this from the retail business or commercial, when you look at the proximity of that retail business, you know, sort of inside the campus area, the Orchard Place area, you typically want to focus your retail elements along the corridors of the roadways or the road systems. This is off that road system. It's not far off, but it's still inside. And anytime you get farther away from your main thoroughfare traffic fair, like Cedar Avenue, Pilot Knob in this case, that tends to be a little bit of a drawback because everybody wants to be seen when you're a retail business, when you're a commercial business. Apartment doesn't need to be seen. People, it's a destination place for those residents. They come and go, they know where they live. And the ones that want to be seen are the ones along those high traffic corridors like Pilot Knob, 42, Cedar Avenue.
Okay,
Anybody else?
can I?
Oh, you want to, sure.
And you might have addressed this, and I apologize if you did, but with the land uses map, the existing and proposed, with respect to the high-density housing that's kind of north and west of the proposed site, that's still undeveloped? There's nothing planned for that at this point in time?
Correct. Commissioner Mahowald, so what you're seeing here, I believe this is referred to as the Shores, the Pulte Home Development, just on the other side. These ponds are a little bit exaggerated on their color scheme, but just to the north is guided for high density. This is intended to be sort of a holding place for Pulte Homes to take over that site once AVR or McNamara stops or doesn't need that site. Right now, if there was an aerial photo, I don't think we have one. Yep. You can kind of see what they refer to as their maintenance yard or their boneyard. So eventually this area will turn into more than likely more townhomes. So that is still being left alone. This is, again, separated by those very large ponding systems that we asked to be provided to help with their stormwater management for this area.
Okay, and then
Sure, no, go ahead.
at least one more here. You know, I noticed on, I think it was the last page of the report or the memorandum, it talks about, what the 2019 plan for that space. And I do remember it, I guess, when we were talking about the gathering space to the northwest of the property, where it talked about, I guess it's the third to last paragraph, where it talked about 2 medium box retail buildings are shown with 2 restaurant pads in between outdoor patios leading to a circular concrete feature.
Yes.
I guess that sounds nice to me. I mean, that sounds like a completion of that overall development. And obviously, this would preclude that from happening.
Correct.
So we're kind of, at this point anyway, at least with respect to this parcel, precluding any future development that would have those types of businesses, those types of connecting to those publicly available lands, which I guess is a concern to me, because I think that could really be a nice anchor and allow those to be well utilized. Obviously, this would bring a lot of people down there too. It's just a different concept for that.
Anybody else? Commissioner Halas?
Madam Chair, Tim, I will say that based on where it sits, the property sits, and with the park to the west of it, with multifamily dwelling to the west of that, and it does complement the area. And yes, it is going from commercial to high density, but you do have the park system just to the west of that, and the trails that they're working through there. I do compliment them on coming up with the extra letters from the retailers from the area that say that this will help them and complement their business also, which is a nice balance. It keeps people out of their cars, walking, and an easy walk home, that they can do that with what Commissioner Scanlon mentioned as good walkways and good directions, so it's a safe, easy area that they can get to and from where they're going. But I think they've done their extras on here and shown that this can work and does complement each other in this situation. So no question there, just a comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Loss. I wanted to point out, thank you for reminding me, those letters that came in today, they're letters of support. We'd like to have you accept those as part of the further public record, which we'll make it as part of this proceedings tonight. They weren't presented at the official public hearing, but you can still accept them as part of the public record. So I think they do lend some good support. Obviously, these retail users love to have, like we refer to as butts in the seat kind of thing. And this is where you got your people right next door, and they can walk over to, the Punch Pizza, the Lumi Nails, and the other businesses over there, get their groceries from Wens and Byerly's, get their shoes, everything banking. All that's right there within easily walking distance, and we want to encourage that and less dependent upon the cars. We hope that most people do walk over there and visit and trade with those uses over there.
One more, Commissioner Sandell?
Madam Chair, Tim, I have an echo comment, basically, because my biggest concern, after some of the other things had been kind of allayed, was will the other businesses around there who expected something and now it's being changed, will that impact them negatively? And so having this definitely just kind of cements that nope, that's not going to be a problem for them. And so I appreciate that you all took the time to do that. So thank you for that.
I think that's it, Tim.
Okay.
Does the applicant want to still make their? You said you had something to.
They have a little presentation.
Presentation.
Would you want, you can,
Do you feel we need one?
or would you rather just bounce some questions off them.
I just want questions. Any presentation?
Yeah, their presentation and.
We'll, you worked hard at it, we will watch it.
Okay, all right then. Well, Roger, I think, has the thumb drive that we're gonna need to play the presentation. Oh, you've got it. All right, never mind, you got it in time, so. Good evening, Chris Moe with HJ Development, 2425 Thoroughbred Lane in Orono. We're the master developer here in the project. Thanks for having us back tonight. Roger Fink with Trident is here too, to also participate in any of this presentation should he need to. Thank you, Tim, for the thorough presentation. Done very well. Just some additional things that we put together to complement what Tim and staff has done was, first, what you see here is really putting a bunch of examples of other multifamily in close proximity to commercial that either Trident or other commercial property developers alongside residential developers, multifamily developers have done in various locations throughout the metro, just so you could say, okay, where is some of these locations that I could look at and get an idea of where it's happened and how it's turned out. So this first one here, and we have a number of them, we can just kind of run through them, and if you have questions or want to stop me, just feel free to go ahead and do that. This is a Trident project, Lake Jonathan Flats in Chaska. This parcel, and Roger can correct me if I'm wrong, was originally zoned commercial, correct, Roger?
That's correct, yeah, it's originally a medical clinic.
That was zoned there, that never came to fruition, and they worked with the city of Chaska in this instance to change the land use for that site, built a multifamily project there. As you can see, it's really in close proximity to a lot of other strip retail, bigger box retail, restaurants, so felt that was a good example. Can we go to the next slide?
Can I add one anecdote?
Why don't you come on up?
Not part of this presentation, but because I was so involved with this particular development, I thought it might be of some interest to note that immediately south of the yellow building that you see there, which is the apartment building, is a inline, what I call strip retail center, anchored by a Quick Trip at the south. The landowner that owns the retail center became acquainted with us through the course of our construction, and is the same landowner who owns the Kohl's retail center just north of there, about a quarter mile. When he saw the success we had with Lake Jonathan Flats in relationship to the retail and commercial uses that are there just to the south of us, he approached us about some vacant property that he still owns at the Kohl's department store retail center, right there by the Hazeltine National Golf Course. He said, I've had these extra lots available for 20 years. I cannot find a junior box retailer or a hotel. And he went through a whole list of other uses he attempted to court and locate there next to the Kohl's store, next to the McDonald's, next to the Chipotle, the Aldi, and everything that's there. He approached us about doing an apartment building there. We just completed the plaza at Hazeltine, got our CO this month, 112 units right there by the Kohl's store. So not only did we have success in Chaska with Lake Jonathan Flats integrated with commercial uses, but we actually brought a apartment building to a shopping center and built it right on their parking lot, essentially, to complement the retail uses. The retailers love it. We've built a great relationship with them. We work very closely with Chaska City staff to make sure circulation, signage, pedestrian safety, segregation of parking lots and everything were well thought out, and we're very proud of that project. But I just wanted to add that little as a side note because you're Chaska.
Yeah, why don't you just stay up here? So this is another one that isn't one of Roger's projects, but this is Arbor Lakes in Maple Grove. So everybody's familiar with Arbor Lakes, obviously a big bustling retail area, and there's a lot of multifamily adjacent to that has happened and continues to happen in Maple Grove. The Reserve at Mendota Village, Tim's alma mater here, in Mendota Heights. So did you work on this project? Yeah, so This is one Tim could give you more detail than Roger or I could, but again, it's multifamily, adjacent in close proximity to retail. Gallery on Nicollet, so this is another HJ development property. We have owned the Cub Foods and adjacent retail shopping center since original development circa 2005, I want to say. And there's a vacant parcel of land here that's highlighted that now has an apartment building on it that Chase Properties built recently, just finished it. But that was a vacant parcel of land that sat for 20 years as well, until the city of Burnsville decided they wanted to see something happen there and allowed rental housing to happen there. We've had no complaints out of Cub Foods or any of our other retailers. It's all been, sales have only gone up and they're happy to have it there. This is in Egan, so not too far from you here in Apple Valley. City View Apartments off of Yankee Doodle Promenade. Typical, just run-of-the-mill apartment building, again, adjacent to a lot of retail. This is in Ramsey, off of Highway 10 and Armstrong Boulevard. This is a Coburn's anchored shopping center with the grocery store and a number of other retail uses. This is actually a hotel here, so this site isn't 100% accurate. Roger corrected me on that, but if you move just a little bit to the east, there is all kinds of apartments that are just, would be kind of right where our screen cuts off here. And then moving on to Eden Prairie, adjacent to the Eden Prairie Center. Our firm just recently, a week ago, acquired this shopping center that sits adjacent to all of this residential that just got built, and what caused us to want to buy it was hearing from all the retailers that their sales had improved drastically after that stuff did get built. So it's a property we had previously looked at buying, heard bad news from all of the retailers in terms of sales. Adjacent retail got built, things have improved, and now we decided we would like to own it. And then this is just another example in Eden Prairie, kind of by the Opus Business Park, where you've seen a lot of older, outdated commercial uses be actually torn down, and now you have a lot of new apartments being built next to some newer retail in that Opus Business Park. Exchange Apartments in New Brighton, again, kind of same thing. Got fitness centers, restaurants, retail, next to a new apartment building. And I think last but not least, this is Cottage Grove, off of 80th Street and Hemingway Avenue. Same kind of deal, you've got a Hy-Vee grocery store, number of other smaller retail buildings, and then multifamily adjacent to it. So just wanted to give you kind of a number of options that you could look at if you needed to kind of help process those thoughts. I apologize not getting it to you a little bit earlier to take a look at it.
I'll take the blame for that.
We had a little communication breakdown and I was traveling last week, so happy to answer any other questions about those if you have any.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody have any questions?
We've got more.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Always got a question. Madam Chair, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on my comments to Tim in that you kind of reinforced it by what you showed here, and then also with the references back from the retailers within the area right now, is that when you come back to us that that we could look at some ways of making that interaction better and accessibility, walkability, that wasn't planned there previously.
Sure.
So if you could put some thought to that, I appreciate that. And I think it's been kind of echoed amongst a few of us here too. So put some thought to that. So thank you again for the added presentation here. So
Yeah, you're welcome. And I do have, next I've got a couple renderings. One of the questions that a couple of you had last time was, you know, what could it look like to the north? And so we spent some time putting some additional renderings together that show what could end up happening there, although it's not, set in stone. So we'll take a look at a couple options here, this being the first one immediately north of the proposed apartment project is, it's a little hard to see here, it's a little blurry, but that's a proposed larger format sit-down restaurant, which is something that, we've heard from staff, planning and council that they would like to see here. And so that's still a goal of ours to bring something like, the Copper Pint that was once planned for here to here. So we still have some room to do that. I think that location immediately north of the multifamily building with the public amenity space could be a really neat space to do that with some outdoor seating that plays off of it if there's live music events or other types of gatherings going on there. I think that would be a nice way to tie into that. North of that, you've got the two retail smaller strip centers that you've seen in the past that we've been trying to get out of the ground and have not been successful in securing tenants for, but are still hopeful that as things change from an interest rate perspective, construction costs, tenants adjust to the new normal paying rents, we do feel like we'll be able to obtain some of those smaller shops, strip retail type tenants that you see in the other smaller buildings where Punch Pizza is and Crispin Green. So we do have some activity for those types of users that would allow us to come back and build those buildings that we've been trying to build for a while. And then the larger box behind it could be a number of things. It could be some sort of an entertainment use. It could be a junior box retailer if we get to the point where, we actually figure out how to make those work. We'll see. So that's one look at what could happen. And then the other one here is a big entertainment user, but still having that restaurant. So we are in active discussions with a group whose this plan is really reflective of their preliminary planning that would be heavy entertainment focus. So think outdoor volleyball, bocce ball, bean bags, and indoor bowling, darts, duck pin bowling. Preliminary conversations, but it's obviously progressed to the point where they've spent some time on planning, and we think a use like this would be great if we can figure that out. I think that it would just complement everything else that we have here and be a great traffic draw and something that the community really doesn't have now. So if I were to choose between the two, this is one that I really prefer. But, we're still considering all options that we have for the area.
Well, interest rates went down today, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah.
That should help us. Yeah, we'll see. So things are heading in the right direction from that standpoint, which is good.
Good.
Any questions on those site plans before
I don't think so.
I move on? Okay. The other question that we were asked of is, what's available in terms of tenant space out there, where's the existing vacancy and where have tenants been moving? So this kind of gives you a summary of recent leasing activity that's happened in the city of Apple Valley. And most, if not all of these tenants we've been pursuing for Orchard Place and have lost to other existing, buildings, just because it's less expensive for them to go open up in an existing building. And there still remains additional existing inventory out there, especially in the junior box space. You've got the Bed Bath & Beyond space, which, as you all probably know, Nordstrom Rack is taking, but we were pursuing them, and when that option came up, that was a much lower cost option for them. They took that. Best Buy has now closed, so you have the Best Buy space, and Experience Fitness has now closed recently. So those are 30 to 40,000 square foot boxes that are going to go for a quarter to half of what new construction would. So those are going to take a while to get absorbed, I would assume, but it'll happen. It's just until that happens, we're not going to be successful with any of the junior box stuff in our project. Like I said, I'm more confident in the smaller shop things, but as you can see, if you look up and down here, Dave's Hot Chicken took the former Dairy Queen location. X Golf took something in Times Square that I think was like a secondhand store or outlet.
Many different stores.
Many different stores. Yeah. And they still have some space available in that shopping center as well. Panera took a former Baker's Square, Qdoba took the former Panera. So you see kind of the pattern that's there. There's a lot of existing inventory that has been built in the city, and it does turn over, and you constantly kind of see that. So I think you've kind of reached a point where there's just enough space that needs can be met through a lot of what's already there.
But large entertainment is a great idea for,
Yeah, as long as they don't go to the Experience Fitness space or something.
we need bigger than that, yeah.
So, yeah, we feel good about that prospect right now, but time will tell. So that's it for my part of the little presentation that I had.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
That was very nice. Any questions for either one of them? I don't think so. I think we're ready to make our motion, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I will just add by saying, Madam Chair and members of the commission, thank you for all your attention and your questions for this. Thank you, Chris, for that detailed presentation, and Tim. That was a very thorough staff report. We appreciate all the time and effort into that. I don't know that I have a lot that I could add on top of everything you've already heard. There's some more slides here, but I think that the message has been pretty well delivered, and we really appreciate your attention and taking this application up again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, do I hear a motion from anyone?
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of a comprehensive plan amendment from C commercial to HD high-density residential of the 5.62 acre parcel on the northwest corner of 157th Street West and English Avenue.
Second.
Okay, so that is made by Commissioner Scanlon and seconded by Commissioner Sandal. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Well, do you want to stay up here, Tim? Or do you want to sit down and say it? Okay. Other business, and we will have Tim Benetti finish that off.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor? How about Madam Chair?
Sure, I'll take it.
We have our next meeting of Wednesday, October 2nd, also followed by our Wednesday, October 16th. Our council meetings are Thursday, September 26th and the 10th. The item that was just acted on for tonight, the land use amendment, that will be probably placed on the October 10th. It will be on the October 10th meeting. With that, I have no other updates for you.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Made by Commissioner Scanlon. I think I heard Commissioner Scanlon, or Sandal second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. This meeting has adjourned.